Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? What we're going to be talking about today is the sabotage of our infrastructure. And it's the infrastructure that serves human communities. And it's always wrong, right? And when there's when the two substations, okay, in North Carolina were reportedly taken down by gunfire in an apparent criminal act, the establishment media went to work condemning that act, right? And the gunfire that caused damage that could take days to repair, leaving tens of thousands of people without electricity. You heard from one of our own community members what she believes happened, what she's personally going through, okay? And most of the establishment media outlets, they echoed the sentiment of what other these MSN, they all said the same exact thing, right? Because they were being told, they were preached to, this is what you say, this is what you say, this is what you say, right? So they had no condemnation, okay, for data. Of course not. Why would they? Shutting down, remember when like the first week that he was in office, he shut down all the oil pipelines and the drilling permits that ultimately provided energy resources for hundreds of millions of Americans. And similarly, there's no establishment media outlet condemning the seizure of 3,000 farms by the government of the Netherlands. As many as 11,200 farms may be forced to shut down in the Netherlands in order to meet so-called goals. Okay? This is a critical food infrastructure that feeds families across Europe and around the world. It is not a trivial thing to start dismantling thousands of farms upon which millions of people depend on. When governments sabotage farms, MSM celebrate the destruction. Why? Why? The dismantling of food and energy infrastructure is like, it's widely celebrated. It's not condemned by the legacy media in thousands of stories urging compliance with these goals. While we condemn all these acts of sabotage against the infrastructure, it begs the obvious question. Why isn't the MSM also celebrating the North Carolina power substation attack as another milestone towards achieving the much touted goals? Just a question. So the media sounds the alarm over this shooter sabotage of power substation in North Carolina, right? Says nothing about government sabotage of food, farm, fertilizer, fuel. Nothing. And it's a serious question. Okay, these goals, okay, as more and more people are discovering, really mean shutting down the infrastructure of modern society and plunging the world's Western nations into darkness and scarcity. We are constantly being lectured by the MSM about how using food and energy is a horrible thing, and how the only way to be green is to essentially stop using our air conditioners, driving vehicles, consuming meat, and other like similar demands. German farmers have been ordered to slash nitrogen fertilizer usage in order to comply with green demands from the EU, right? The irony isn't lost on anyone paying attention, since nitrogen is food for plants, and slashing nitrogen on the nitrogen use on food crops will obviously result in what? Plummeting crop fields, food scarcity, price inflation at grocery stores. But somehow this green movement has become anti-plant, as if green plants are the enemy of planet Earth. It's an absurd conjecture that could only come from those who are significantly illiterate about atmospheric chemistry, photosynthesis, and the basics of botany. We learned all about this in 8th grade science class. I don't know how they don't know this. Right now, right this very second, Europeans are facing a potentially catastrophic winter. Absent the usual energy abundance that previously provided affordable heat, electricity, nitrogen fertilizer production. Okay. What's astonishing is that Europe has an abundance of natural energy resources right under its feet, yet lacks the political fortitude to oppose the Greens and tap into the resources they already possess. They are sitting on an energy goldmine, so to speak, but yet somehow facing very real starvation, freezing, and agricultural collapse in the spring due to lack of domestic fertilizer production. This is all the result of deliberate government sabotage of Europe's domestic energy infrastructure. Sabotage. They didn't sabotage the infrastructure with rifle fire like in North Carolina. They sabotaged it with government policy. Yet the result is the same. Lights out. Sky-high prices for electricity, businesses shuttered, including glass makers, metal smelters, all of it. Accelerating poverty, people eating dog food, heating with candles. The realization here should be frightening. Everyone should be scared. Both governments and establishment, MSM, media, whatever, are not actually opposed to this sabotage of the infrastructure. They merely want to control the sabotage so that it suits their goals, their agenda. If a terrorist group were to have destroyed the 3,000 farms in the Netherlands, there would be a global outcry about violence against farms and farmers. But when the Dutch government destroys the 3,000 farms, suddenly it's acceptable to the powers that be because, well, green logic, oh my gosh. Farms are bad, we're told. Fossil fuel is bad, we're told. Diesel fuel is bad, we're told. Hamburgers are bad, nitrogen is bad, fertilizer is bad. Yet, these are the very things that keep humanity going. They stop us from being hungry. And if you lose them due to government policy sabotage, literally billions of people will starve to death. It is like impossible to deny that the very governments running these sabotage operations are somehow not aware of the ramifications of their takedowns of food, energy, fertilizer. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're fully aware of what it's going to cause: social upheaval, riots, desperation. Desperate people, desperate times, desperate measures. And the real question then is why these governments are deliberately destroying the food, energy supplies of Western nations. The larger question is why they want these civil unrest, why they want these riots, why they want this desperation. Why? I don't, maybe it's because I'm of sound mind and body, and I'll never understand their way of thinking. But maybe it's because that's the recipe that they're running right now. If you want to bake a cake, you get your eggs, your flour, your sugar. If you want to cause civil unrest and riots, you take down the power, the food, right? You shutter the farms, the pipelines, the fossil fuels. You are following a recipe to bake in exactly the outcome that you desire. Sabotage against infrastructure is carried out by the government. It's the weaponization of food scarcity, a tactic that has been pursued many times throughout history. I've said this before in other videos. History is repeating itself. Most notably, Holodomor, Ukraine, where Soviet leaders deliberately starved millions of Ukrainians to death in the 1930s, primarily to suppress an ethnic group whose politics opposed those of the Soviet Empire at the time. So far, there's like no real signs that any Western government has any real interest in doing that, which means that there's not much suffering ahead for citizens of Europe, North America, Australia, and other countries. Food scarcity and price inflation are going to get much, much worse for the next couple of years. But under Biden, a person could reasonably argue the actions of the government now resembles those of like the former Soviet Union, which vehemently denied that Holodomor even took place. Remember when a White House spokesperson tells you that there's no inflation, there's no food shortages, there's no problem with diesel or supply chains, there's no problem. Ask any mom across the country, me including, ask any mom, if they can readily source infant formula right now at any supermarket. I don't buy infant formula, but I know moms who have infants. Ask any of them. They can. Ask any pharmacist about the 124 prescriptions that the FDA are nearly wiped out of in the supply chain right now. And those include common OTCs like Tylenol or like amoxicillin too, by the way. Ask any trucker about what's going on with the diesel. Ask any of the rail workers about why they're about to go on strike and bring the nation's transportation infrastructure to a halt. You might even ask the Mississippi River barge pilots about the log jams and the piles of beans collecting on the banks along the river as transportation capacity struggles to meet demand. Across North America, Europe, and other continents, food scarcity and food inflation are worsening by the day. And these observable events have a cause. And that cause is deliberate government sabotage of food and energy infrastructure. Now, I do know that the FBI is investigating the possible shooters in the North Carolina attack on the power grid. Yet, nobody from either of the three-letter agencies or MSM are investigating the deliberate sabotage of the food energy infrastructure that will plunge hundreds of millions of people into poverty, starvation, and desperation if we don't change course immediately. Because when rogue individuals carry out sabotage, it's called terrorism. But when the government carries out sabotage, it's called policy. Doesn't make sense, but it does make sense. All right, guys, I'm out of here. I appreciate you. You stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping. And as always, fearless. Ciao.